Hey, hey, it's the Monkees, one of the most commercially successful pop groups of the 1960s and beyond. The Monkees had 6 top 10 hits and sold millions of records, and millions of 12-year-olds tuned in each week to their TV sitcom, conveniently also called The Monkees. And the merchandising, it's the sweetest plum. Lunchboxes, dolls, coloring books, 45 RPM records, you name it, and in the late 60s you could buy it. Of course, the Monkees weren't without their critics, who called them untalented, manufactured, shallow, childish, and any number of adjectives not usually used to describe their contemporaries, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and Bob Dylan. They were, and still are, mocked relentlessly. The Beatles had been the Fab Four, but the Monkees were the Prefab Four. Some people said they monkeyed around. Now, to me, them's fightin' words. But Mickey, Davy, Mike, and Peter, they were too busy singing to put anybody down. And I think that overall decency, along with some great songs, has always been part of their lasting appeal. That said, they weren't above a bit of biting social comment. Let's take the next train to status symbol land and take a closer look at one of their biggest and, I think, best singles, Pleasant Valley Sunday. I'm your host, Charles Anxious. Let's get inside the song. So who were these guys? The Monkees were assembled in 1966 as the fictional rock group at the heart of a new NBC sitcom from producers Bob Rafelson and Bert Schneider. Rafelson had first conceived of a show about a pop group as far back as 1960. This was well before Beatlemania struck in 1964, which might explain why he couldn't sell the show to a network until 1965. At which point Mickey Dolenz, Davy Jones, Mike Nesmith, and Peter Tork were cast as the group's 4 members. Dolenz and Jones were working actors. Jones was English. Nesmith was an aspiring singer-songwriter, and Tork, at 23, the oldest Monkee to be hired, was also a singer who'd worked in clubs in Greenwich Village. Credibility. Music industry bigwig Don Kirshner was brought in as the music director, guiding the recording side of what was about to become a commercial and cultural phenomenon. The Monkees' first single, Last Train to Clarksville, was released on August 16, 1966, and the series premiered in September. It didn't take long for the Monkees to reach the heights of success, and for a while they were unavoidable, with a string of top 10 singles and 2 Emmys for the TV show in 1967, including Outstanding Comedy Series. Unfortunately, it also didn't take long for the backlash to arise, when it became widely known that the Monkees were not an authentic rock group. In fact, the group was purpose-built, and the boys were actors. And although they were playing rock stars, they weren't playing instruments. The boys had never been happy with this arrangement, and now, at their insistence, they were finally allowed to contribute more than just their voices to the records. They frequently played instruments, and Nesmith even wrote a handful of minor hits for the group. But it was too late, and they had lost their public, and it was all downhill from there. After the single Valerie hit number 3 in early 1968, and they never cracked the top 10 again. The critical and commercial failure of their confusing 1968 feature film Head, with cameos by Frank Zappa and Dennis Hopper, was the death knell. Tork quit in 1969 and Nesmith in 1970, and before long, the Monkees were first a memory, then a memory business. There were solo albums and a few reunions over the following decades, and a brief revival in the 1980s of Monkey Mania, courtesy of MTV. Jones died in 2012, Tork in 2019, and Nesmith in 2021. Dolenz has remained active in music, recording and touring. Pleasant Valley Sunday was written in 1966 by Carole King and her husband Jerry Goffin, one of the top songwriting teams of the period. Carole, of course, went on to enormous success and acclaim as a solo artist, with her 1971 album Tapestry. Carole and Jerry had just moved to Suburban, New Jersey, where a street named Pleasant Valley Way caught their eyes and ears. Goffin wrote a set of lyrics about suburban life, circa 1966, the kids, the barbecues, the ever-present obligation to keep up with the Joneses, that King set to a climbing, yearning melody in a harmonic context considerably more labile and interesting than the world the lyrics describe. The Monkees version was released as a single in July 1967. It was also included on the self-consciously titled LP Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones Limited. Yes, those are the astrological signs of the three monkeys not named Jones. The single peaked on August 19th at number 3 on Billboard's Hot 100, behind the Beatles' idealistic montage All You Need Is Love and the Doors' menacing Come On, Light My Fire. By this time, the boys were being allowed to play a bit on their recordings, and the credited personnel for this cut were Dolenz on lead vocal, Jones on backing vocal, Nesmith on backing vocal and electric guitar, including the signature riff that opens the song, and Torque on backing vocal and piano. Session players included Bill Chadwick on acoustic guitar, Chip Douglas on electric bass, and Fast Eddie Ho on drums and percussion. There's something that sounds to me like an organ, prominent during the bridge. Maybe that's the piano that Torque supposedly played. If so, it's an electric piano of some kind, or it's heavily processed. The opening riff is an interesting one. I would argue that it's a direct descendant of the riff in the Beatles' 1965 hit Day Tripper, by way of the riff in their 1966 hit Paperback Writer. Have a listen. To make the comparison easier to hear and see, I'll play and notate them all in the same key as Pleasant Valley Sunday, A major. Here's Day Tripper. Here's Paperback Writer. And here's Pleasant Valley Sunday. See what I mean? In fact, you could mix the Paperback Writer and Pleasant Valley Sunday riffs together, and no one would bat an eye. All three riffs share two important similarities. They use the Mixolydian Mode, with its flatted 7th scale degree, a G natural, shown in green, instead of the G sharp that appears in the A major scale. And they all feature syncopation across a strong pulse, either the first or the third beat of the measure, shown in red. I don't think it's a stretch to say that this was a conscious choice by the arranger and producer. If you compare Carole King's relatively sedate, folk-inspired demo with the Monkees' up-tempo take, it's not hard to imagine someone in the studio saying, "Not bad, but give me about 75% more Beatles and maybe a dash of Rolling Stones. I got hot tub payments to make." I could be wrong. Maybe it's a thoroughly original idea from Nesmith. But even so, I don't think there's any hiding its antecedents. What if Tool were to cover this song? Also quite interesting in this song is its modulations, or shifts from one key to another. We begin in A major, and all the verses are in that key. For the choruses, though, we move to C major for the first 8 bars, then back to A major for the second 8 bars. There's also a brief visit to F major near the end of the song as we move through 2 half choruses just before the outro. All the modulations, except for the one from C major to F major, are what are known as Chromatic Mediant modulations. The key changes to one that's a scale degree of a major or minor third away and diatonically unrelated. The move from A major to C major for the chorus is up by a minor third. Then, as we enter the second half of the chorus, we return to A major, but on its dominant or 5 chord of E. This move, from a C major chord to an E major chord, is up by a major third. Actually, this particular move is eased a bit by touching briefly on a D major chord, and in fact, the modulation from A major to C major is smoothly accomplished as well, because the verse chord progression is A major to G major with an A in the bass. That G major chord, in this instance borrowed from the A Mixolydian mode, fits perfectly within the key of C major, where it's the 5 chord. So the step up to that key for the chorus, although exciting, isn't really as abrupt as it might sound. Comparing the two versions further, we see that Carol's demo lacks a few of the chord changes present in the Monkees version. In the chorus, the Monkees version uses 2 substitutions, replacing one chord with another that functions similarly, that aren't present in Carol's demo. Also, after the bridge, the demo is pretty much finished, as Carol simply repeats the title phrase into the fade-out. The Monkees stretch it out a bit, adding a wordless vocal over another verse progression, then those 2 half choruses, before commencing a pretty interesting outro. Back in A major, the riff reappears, and the title phrase is repeated, but things soon get weird, as a heavily processed, reverberated signal builds in volume, while the dry sound of the voices and the band fades back, and then vanishes almost altogether. As the song ends, what we hear is mostly a wash of echo and noise, with the ghost of the opening riff trailing off uncertainly. What's going on here? Have we fallen into a chamber of indistinct echoes? A void of sameness and stultifying, meaningless noise? Meh, I think they were just monkeying around with the equipment. But now that we're getting philosophical, what's the message? What are we to think as we turn in at the end of another Pleasant Valley Sunday? The music industry trade magazine Cashbox called Pleasant Valley Sunday an up-tempo, happy-flavored ditty celebrating summertime activities that are regarded as all-American and quaint. This, of course, misses the point entirely. Jerry Goffin's lyrics celebrate nothing, and only call into question the futility and dreariness of the American dream as it played out in the suburbs of the mid-60s. The local rock group, the weekend squire, proud Mrs. Gray, serene Mr. Green, they all live in a Cheever-esque nightmare of bland homogeneity and soul-numbing conspicuous consumption. Conform, or be cast out. But, as in every Cheever-esque nightmare, there's beauty everywhere, not least in the song itself, to cloak the existential despair. And the song can take the negativity of its message only so far. Its function as a commercial product prevents its cast of characters from taking the bizarre, self-destructive, even homicidal steps of Cheever's gin-soaked, pool-hopping suburbanites. Interestingly, there's a slight difference in the lyrics of the bridge between Carole King's demo and the Monkees version, as evidently someone decided that the final line in the original, "I don't ever want to see another Pleasant Valley Sunday," might be open to a darker interpretation. Although personally, I don't believe Goffin's lyric references suicide. There's also the uncomfortable irony of criticizing the spiritual emptiness and disposable quality of modern suburban life in the form of a pop song. It's on the charts for a few weeks, maybe a couple of months. The kids love it. A few $1 million more Monkees merchandise ends up in suburban bedrooms, and decades later on eBay. And then it's gone, replaced by the next one on the conveyor belt, Ode to Billy Joe by Bobby Gentry. And that's a story for another day. Pleasant Valley Sunday has been a golden oldie for decades now, never falling entirely into disuse. And with good reason. It's really good. It was well conceived, well crafted, energetically performed, and, probably most important, effectively marketed. It's catchy, and it's musically and lyrically complex, for a pop song. It's got a good beat, and I don't doubt that preteens danced to it. Whatever the Monkees' deficiencies, as authentic messengers of their times, and whatever this song's ironies, it holds up. So the only remaining question is, what would the world be like if Stephen Stills had been a monkey? I'm Charles Anxious, and this has been Inside the Song. Thanks very much for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.